Good Friday morning. Here it is, the 30th of January, and we have another impending winter storm for parts of the Mid-Atlantic region, down through the Carolinas and actually back towards Georgia, portions of Tennessee, also under a winter storm warning for the weekend. I'm meteorologist Craig Moeller. You found us here on the weather desk. We are starting our extended weather coverage ahead of this developing storm system here at 13 News Now, here on the Plus. 13 News Now Plus with a full hour version of the weather desk. Maybe you're finding us here on 13 News Now Plus. Maybe you're finding us on YouTube. It doesn't matter. We're just happy you're here. I will tell you, we will have a lot of extended coverage through this weekend's big weather event right here on Plus. We've got extended stream set up, and the full team is going to be working. I'll be working both Saturday and Sunday. Don't normally work the weekends, but I'll be in to make sure you're covered with the impending winter storm. So let's get into our headlines, what we're covering for you today. We do have a winter storm set to hit this weekend, and Virginia and North Carolina are bracing. We're going to hear from folks with NCDOT. We'll hear from Dominion Energy a little later in the show as the whole region is preparing. And keep in mind, we dealt with a winter storm last weekend. Now, it wasn't as big an issue for some places near the coast. We actually had some more rain in the mix. We had the snow and ice farther inland. We'll talk a little bit about how we came through all of that and what is going to be different about this go-around this weekend. As we take a look, we're also going to have, again, some more information on other impacts from this weather, including Carnival Cruise Line having to adjust for the storm. You know, there's more snow headaches up in the D.C. area. We'll show you where they're going with some of the massive amounts of snow they've had to remove from up around D.C. and Maryland. That whole region up there really still digging out. Still snow fines as well. We'll explain that if you haven't heard. And then we'll finish up with some more team coverage. Hunter Force will be back in here, and we'll really get into some of the nitty-gritty on the details of all of this. I also want to start off, though, by giving you the overview and some of the main impacts we are anticipating with our weekend winter weather and this storm. Saturday into Sunday, you know, early this week we declared a weather impact alert for the developing storm. These have been pretty well advertised. We knew this was going to be a thing. The models have had some modifications over the week in terms of the amounts of snow projecting and this and that, but we are looking at a lot of snow potentially across parts of the area. Other areas will not get as much. There's going to be a sharp cutoff between those that have a lot of snow and those that don't get much. We'll explain that, and then we'll talk about how that may shift a little bit. The winds are also going to be a bigger deal with this coastal system. Potentially, we could see some very gusty winds, especially at the ocean front and down along the Outer Banks, and with north and northeast winds coming in and howling. That's going to push our tide levels well above normal. We are anticipating the potential for some coastal flooding on Sunday, so you definitely want to pay attention to the forecast. Make sure you've got your cell phones and your other mobile devices well charged up ahead of the wintry weather in case you have a power disruption or whatever. You still want to stay in touch with our forecasts and updates, and we will be putting that out throughout the weekend. So let's give you the weekend kind of preview, the overview of the whole thing. We're looking at Saturday, a chilly day. Temperatures in Norfolk starting off low 20s, upper teens inland, and afternoon temperatures on Saturday only in the mid to upper 20s. Plenty cold here for snow to develop, and we do anticipate that developing snow at some point, mainly during the afternoon and into the Saturday night period. That's when it's going to be worse. I think we're going to see the heaviest snow, the strongest winds developing late Saturday night into early Sunday, when I'll be back in studio again covering the winter storm with my colleague Taylor Stephenson. We'll be having everything you need to know in that moment, tracking those gusty winds and the potential tidal flooding. So early Sunday morning, very windy conditions, and that snow still likely. That's going to move out late in the day, temperatures staying in the 20s. So what falls will stick. Now, you see the winter storm warning that is out. This includes all of Hampton roads, both the south side and the peninsula. Hampton, Poquoson, York, Newport News, all included in the winter storm warning. The south side Hampton roads out through Isle of Wight and Southampton, the Franklin area, and all of northeast North Carolina. You'll notice areas to the north, the eastern shore, the northern neck, middle peninsula, and areas out to the west. Here, these areas are under winter storm watch, and there's a winter weather advisory, which includes areas out just west of Farmville and Lynchburg. Those areas under the winter weather advisory. Snow will not likely be as heavy out that way. This is really going to be more confined to the coastal areas and then North Carolina. So we'll talk more about all of that. Let's focus on Hampton roads for a moment. Here is the latest. This system, it is going to produce snow and those stronger winds and the potential for the coastal flooding. So the heavier impacts likely to the south and in North Carolina and along the coast with the wind and the tidal flooding. This is kind of a flip-flop of what we typically get around here. You know, with winter storms, a lot of times the heavier snow, the bigger impacts are felt maybe west, out towards I-95 or up towards Richmond. Sometimes the coast misses out altogether. Not this time. This time it looks like some of the heavier snows may be closer to the coast and down to the south. Snow, wind, tidal flooding, all primary concerns with this system. And there's still some unknowns. We're still figuring out exactly where the low tracks. And when you take a look at the snow projections, you'll understand why a track adjustment 50 miles one way or another will make a huge difference to what we actually get here. So a lot still to kind of iron out, the intensity of the low and the dry air that's in place all coming into play, making this somewhat of a tricky forecast. Now, there is a large spread of snow potential. So with that potential shift in the track, that's why we could see such big differences. Winds are expected to gust 50 to 60 miles per hour at the Outer Banks and along the coast. I'll show you some of the projections with some of the modeling here in just a bit. Tidal flooding is also expected. We do have coastal flood watches up now for Sunday morning with that high tide, and I'll give you a few locations and where we expect it to peak. There's a coastal low coming off. Most likely it's going to be somewhere between these tracks. It may be trending a little farther to the east from what we were looking at yesterday, but still enough to throw moisture in and to produce some heavy snow across parts of the region. Again, if it stays a little closer, if it shifts back a little bit farther to the west, closer to this blue kind of track here, that leaves it in the sweet spot for the heaviest of snows. If it's farther offshore, it's more of a glancing blow to Hampton roads, a little more focused down across the Carolina coastline. So we're going to watch that. One thing for sure, the cold air is in place. It's still bitterly cold as it has been all week. So that's a look at the track potential. Now, as we take a look at another element with those winds kicking up as strong as they are going to be, 50 to 60 mile per hour winds Saturday night into Sunday morning along the coast, we have the potential for wind chills from 0 to 5 below 0. So it is going to be bitterly cold. We have an extreme cold watch, and they may flip that to a warning. Take a look at our wind chills into Saturday. And Saturday morning, you can see down around 0 for Tappahannock and Gloucester, maybe a degree below 0 in Williamsburg. Very cold on the eastern shore, still cold here in Hampton Roads. Saturday morning is going to be chilly, but it's going to get even worse into Sunday morning. So I wanted to show you Saturday night. Look at these wind chills as the winds really start to kick up. Then we get into our morning, Sunday morning, below 0. The wind chill in Norfolk, 3 below in Williamsburg, 3 below in Gloucester, 5 below in Accomack, 2 below in Chesapeake, Cora Peak and Suffolk around 4 degrees below 0, all the way down into North Carolina. Again, dangerous cold. That's why we have the extreme cold watch. So we are going to keep a close eye to that. Impacts, snow, not as great a threat of ice and sleet. This is so cold out there that what falls will be snow. We will see some blowing, drifting snow, and we may even have some blizzard conditions for parts of the area. Tidal flooding, again, moderate to major. We take a look at those areas. Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and Northampton, along with the Carolina coastline, all under the coastal flood watch. You see at Sewell's Point, 5.5, moderate tidal flooding potentially there for Hampton roads on Sunday morning. At the Lynn Haven Inlet, we could see major tidal flooding Sunday with a level of 5.9 feet currently projected. And at Duck Pier, the tide's around 7.1. Again, major tidal flooding. So a lot to watch as we go into the weekend. Now, we're going to talk about North Carolina, and North Carolina Governor Josh Stein has already declared a state of emergency ahead of this winter storm. Brianna Fallon shares more on how the Tar Heel state is preparing.
Between last weekend's winter storm and this weekend's potential snowstorm, NCDOT crews are working around the clock. That's because for a second week in a row, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein declared a state of emergency.
These guys are spread out around the state. They know how to handle these kind of storms, and they're ready to help the people of North Carolina get through this.
Governor Stein says despite both storms happening in the span of a week, NCDOT crews are fully prepared, laying brine and salt on the roads across the state. But on the Outer Banks, the winter storm could bring more than just snow and strong winds.
There is also concern about overwash from tides on the Outer Banks, and so people on the Outer Banks need to be aware and be careful.
That's why Governor Stein and Tim Haas with NCDOT says it's best to plan on staying home and off the roads this weekend.
This is going to be a storm that's more native to North Dakota than North Carolina.
Haas says the Outer Banks could see a historic amount of snow. And while plow crews are prepared to work around the clock this weekend, Haas says you should also prepare at home.
You have tonight, you have tomorrow. Download your movies, go get your food, get your hot chocolate, get your marshmallows. Plan to stay at home this weekend, because if the conditions that they're predicting come true, you're not going to want to go out at all.
Brianna Fallon, 13 News Now.
And we're going to hear more from NCDOT in a few minutes. I wanted to show you again all of North Carolina and most of South Carolina, as well as portions of northeast Georgia and into eastern portions of Tennessee, all included in this winter storm warning. So you see, this does include Charlotte, and I want to let you know a little bit more about what folks there are going to expect. You know, last week we had Chris Mulcahy join us from our sister station, WCNC. Chris, you did such a great job last week. We figured, hey, let's see if we can run it back. First of all, how'd you guys come through last week as far as your ice situation out there? And what are you guys bracing for out in the western part of Carolina?
Well, Craig, as you know, I will take the snow potential any time over the ice potential. So, yeah, so snow is a much better situation that we're dealing with here. So what's in general happening is we had up to about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of ice. We had some power outages, but it wasn't nearly as bad as what our friends over in Mississippi and Oxford are dealing with. But our major impacts for this storm is mainly just going to be the roads, but then also can't forget about the blowing snow. So up in Norfolk, you're kind of right on the cusp of between that either 4 to 6 inch mark of seeing a lot of snow or seeing more of the lessers about the 1 to 3. For us, we're right on the gun for at least 4 to 7 inches across the area. But anytime you have a major impact, that just means that there's a good chance that much of the area is going to be shutting down. So especially from Charlotte over to Lincolnton, and we're also seeing areas over to Wadesboro, everything is deep in the red. So we are very much preparing for this. We're saying, hey, just stay in if you don't need to go out. So here's my most recent updated snow map. I updated this at 6:30. We're seeing widespread blue across the Charlotte area. That is 4 to 7 inches. But as you know, there's two different systems that are interacting here. You're right on the cusp of some of that heavier snow, but that 7 to 9, good chance there. Also, isolated areas of 10, I think really east of 95, we're looking at up to a foot for the possibilities for the extreme measures. For us, I wouldn't be surprised if some of us are cranking things up to about 8 inches. So our bust forecast, if we're completely wrong, dry air eats into it 2 inches. But our biggest one is 4 to 7. And one thing for us here in Charlotte, we have not had a snowstorm that was over 6 inches since 2004. The last time that we even had close to 4 inches was 2018. The last time we were actually over 4 was back in 2014. So it has been a while since we had that boom forecast, but I think some of us are going to have some much higher totals. Now, Craig, as you already know, we love to go by probabilities. And one thing that keeps on happening is we keep on checking these boxes. That 1 to 2, yeah, no, that's happening. 2 to 3, I think, is really the baseline for us. But we're also seeing some of the higher totals now, a 50-50 shot of 8 inches plus. So here's what's happening. We're going to see that widespread snow from system number 1. Meanwhile, you're mainly dealing with that coastal low. This thing's a monster, as you've been talking about. We're going to see more of the eastern side of our viewing area dealing with that. But snow accumulation is all about intensity and duration. And we have the duration because we're first seeing snow arrive here in Charlotte really throughout the Saturday morning time frame, and then it completely takes over for the morning, for the afternoon. So I think we're looking at a minimum of 12 hours of active accumulating snow. And even if we're talking about the lesser 1/4 of an inch per hour, that still brings us to a baseline of 3 inches when this is all said and done. But I think we're going to have a lot of those heavy corridors of some of that heavier snow on and off. Meanwhile, you were talking about wind chills. We already have an extreme cold watch behind this, so that'll turn to an extreme cold warning, because here's our criteria here in the Charlotte. Because as you know, you have a different one in Norfolk.
Sure.
For us, anytime it's feeling like 0 or below, we're going to have an extreme cold warning. It feels like 5 below or less. Hickory's going to be under that, and that's going to be right along the I-40 corridor. And 15 below, it's actually going to be feeling more like 25 below from place to place. And the impacts of that fresh snow is actually going to bring us some records potentially. I have a low of 7 degrees. We haven't been that cold here in the Charlotte area really for over 3 years, and that could lead to record temperatures because of all that evaporation and sublimation, as it's called. So Groundhog Day, the midpoint of winter, one of my favorite days, 7 degrees, the coldest that we've had in history for that February 2nd, 10 degrees. So here's our 7-day forecast. This is not what you like to see, right around 7 degrees, and then after that, a mix of the 40s. So Craig, this is now back-to-back big winter storms, and I haven't even been mentioning what we potentially could see on Wednesday or Thursday, because people don't need all that jazz.
Yeah, I see that. Now, Chris, I got to tell you, as a weather nut, and I see you have the same passion, I feel like we could grab a beer and talk weather for hours here. Couple of interesting points you bring up, though. The blowing snow, that's one thing where we may be looking at some drifting here where, if we call, let's say right now for the Norfolk area, we are looking at 4 to 7 inches or so, higher amounts at the coast and down south. If you get blowing, it may look like you only have 4 inches, but there may be a drift over a little bit where it collects, where maybe you've got a lot more piled up. How big of an issue is that for you there closer to the mountains?
Yeah, I think it's not even just the mountains here, Craig, that we're going to see those wind gusts up to about 30 miles per hour. So I rewound this. A lot of people, I think, are going to be measuring snow saying, we have over a foot of snow. Well, there's a certain precise way of measuring snow. So I think it's more so in the mountains, of course, because they're going to have gusts up to about 45 miles per hour. But I think it's going to be everywhere, Craig. I think it's going to be bare roads. And the next thing you know, we could have a couple of feet that is up against trees and some houses. So I wouldn't just say the mountains. I think the entirety of the Charlotte area is going to have a chance for this. And as you know, like I said, I'd love to grab that beer and we'll talk meteorology. But this low pressure system, this is the perfect setup for you in Virginia, for us here in North Carolina, that typical Miller A setup, nor'easters that just blast up through the Carolinas, develop off the coast, and give us some of those record snowfall totals. I don't know about your exact stat, but this would technically be, if we get 6 inches, only the 24th time since 1879 that we've had 6+ inches of snow on any given day in Charlotte history.
We'll be seeing if that happens. One other thing, that liquid to snow ratio, we're not talking 1 to 10 here. It's so cold, some of the models may be under projecting a little bit, and that's been our trick here. Is it going to be 1 to 15, 1 to 18 maybe? We'll see. But it does look like the snow may really pile up.
And I'm actually walking off right now because I've been talking about that all morning. So, of course, we have the Kuchera snow ratio if we're really trying to weather nerd out. But what I was looking at for a lot of these different ranges across our area, I think that we're going to be right in that cusp as well. So this is the most recent update that I've been talking this morning. The lower bound 15 to 1. And we could still have some dry air that messes with this, but it's all temperature dependent. So we have that dry, fluffy snow that's blowing around. Potential whiteout conditions from all this. But here in Charlotte, our average is 8 to 1. We're doubling that. So that's almost doubling the totals of what we would typically see here, which is great for shoveling. Still, I think it's compactable where the kids are going to be able to enjoy some of the snowballs, my man. But it's one of those things blowing all over the place. It might be a little troublesome for people that are trying to shovel. So that's what I've been telling people. Why don't you just wait till the event's over to get rid of that snow, to let it settle down?
I got it. Chris, I love it so much. My producer's about to tackle me if we don't move along and get to our next interview. But I thank you, and I appreciate you dropping some of the Kuchera ratios out there. That's some good stuff, buddy. Have a good one. We'll talk to Chris Mulcahy, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I also went long, too, so it's not all on you, Craig. Appreciate it.
You got it, buddy. All right, let's keep moving here and talk again about the impending winter storm, and we're going to talk with Dominion Energy. They've been taking extra steps now to make sure that your lights stay on. And joining me to talk more about those preparations, Sharice Newsom. Good to see you, Sharice. I think the last time I saw you, it was post the tornadoes, or that big tornado that hit the northern side of Virginia Beach. That was, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's good to talk to you. Yeah,
Yes,
so
you as well, Craig.
we're not talking tornadoes now. We are talking about the heavy snow that we could see across parts of the region, the brutal cold temperatures. Let's start off, first of all, you guys came through in pretty good shape with last week's storm system. I know you guys were well prepared for that. What are you guys thinking about this upcoming weekend?
Well, I heard you all just talking about the blowing snow, and you are spot on, Craig, because as that snow blows, it's going to blow on trees and tree limbs, which will likely fall on power lines, leading to outages. You know, that blowing snow also makes visibility really challenging. And so we're asking the community to stay off the roads if you don't need to be out there, because we want you to be safe and we want our crews to be safe as they work.
Now, it's interesting, we were facing such a massive winter storm impacting so much of the eastern U.S. Honestly, I was a little concerned if we did have more widespread outages. Dominion has these incredible partnerships where you guys team and you hired extra contractors to come in. In this case, with it being more confined, the worst of the impacts of the southern part of Virginia, do you have more crews available maybe from up north to help out? Or are you guys thinking even about, how you might have to react if it does get bad enough?
To your point, because this storm is concentrated primarily in Hampton roads in northeastern North Carolina, Dominion Energy is leveraging its crews in other parts of its service area that are not expected to be hardest hit. So, as you know, we have crews in the central region of Virginia, in the northwest region of Virginia. And so we can move our crews around to the areas that we expect to be hardest hit. As a matter of fact, that's happening today. We have crews that are getting in place in advance of the storm, and we'll be staging in those areas in Hampton roads and northeast North Carolina to just be extra boots on the ground. We do have partnerships with peer utilities and other agencies, and we'll be working together throughout the storm.
All right, Charisse, I love that you have all this knowledge, and I know I'm kind of throwing some things at you. With the winds potentially, and again, it's a potential gusting over 50, maybe even 50 to 60 miles per hour near the coast. I mean, that's tropical storm force. Do you guys kind of historically have a threshold of winds where when we start gusting to this level or that level, you start to see more issues popping up? I know it's case by case, but just historically, do you kind of have a rule of thumb that where you guys start to say, hey, we typically start to see more at this threshold?
So around 35 miles per hour, that's when the wind presents a real risk for power lines and likely causes outages. Also at around 35 miles per hour or higher, our crews cannot work safely in the bucket trucks, and safety is our top priority for our community and for our crews. And so our crews will be working on the ground and they will work in our operations center, but they will hold off on going in those bucket trucks when there are gusty and sustained winds at 35 miles per hour or higher. As you mentioned earlier, some of those gusts could get even higher than that. We're looking at even up to 50 mile per hour winds. So safety is paramount, and we're going to make sure we work as quickly and as safely as possible.
Charisse, it can't be said enough. Folks need to have their mobile devices charged before these storms, just in case there's a disruption. So let everybody know. I mean, we say it and we want to hear it again. How do folks report outages? And again, what would you say to people if you lose power? Don't assume somebody else is reporting it, right?
Great point, Craig. Yes, go ahead and download the Dominion Energy app. That is the best way to report your outage. It provides you real-time updates as to how the crews are restoring your power, so you'll know when your lights are expected to be back on. Also, don't assume that your neighbor has done the reporting. Go ahead and report it. In these storms, you might experience an intermittent outage where trees will knock out power, crews will get it back on, and because those winds will keep blowing, it may go out again. We want you to report that outage anytime you experience one so that our crews can pinpoint where those trouble spots are.
All right, Charisse Newsome, you are the best. Thanks so much for taking
You're
time
the best,
out of
Craig.
your
You
day.
stay safe. And the last time we saw each other actually was in the produce aisle and food line. I don't know if you remember that.
You're right. I forgot about that. All right, I was thinking work, but yeah, there's always running into each other at the produce aisle.
Yes,
hey,
yes.
you have
All
a
right.
great day, and again, stay warm, and we'll just kind of, keep our thoughts with the Dominion Energy crews that are out there facing outages over this weekend. It's going to be bitter cold. Thank you so much.
Take care. Stay safe.
Take care. All right, we're going to take a short break. You can see how cold it is right now across the region. We've got more from the weather desk in 2 minutes. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Craig Moeller. The Virginia Department of Transportation is once again preparing for snow across the region. VDOT crews mobilized again. This is a look at crews near Richmond replenishing stockpiles of salt and sand. Crews are working around the clock to help areas still dealing with compacted snow and ice from the previous storm. They'll also work 12-hour shifts through the weekend. Now, the North Carolina Department of Transportation has also been busy preparing for the storm. The weather not too bad today. It's cold out there, but we haven't got the wintry weather hitting us yet. Now's the time they're preparing. And joining me to talk more about how NCDOT crews are getting the roads ready, we have Tim Haas with NCDOT Division 1. Tim, we talked previously and we were getting ready for the potential ice. We really got a lot of mixing last time, which was a huge blessing. Let's talk about what you guys are bracing for right now. We could see some very heavy snow.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. Thanks for having me on. This is a different story than last week. Last week we got a little lucky. It was not too bad out here on the coast. But this week we are preparing for what could be a historic snowstorm. We don't see these out here a lot on the Outer Banks. So we have prepared the roads. We have brined completely the division. We have brined it. We're getting ready to plow and salt once the storm hits. We've got our trucks on standby. We've got what we call fully operated rental agreements with contractors that we've got on standby. So we're ready to go, but it's going to be a historic snowstorm if the forecasts come true.
You know, Tim, you mentioned you guys are brined, you're getting ready to salt it. A lot of people may not know kind of the process here and how you prepare the roads. There are different things that, and even in other parts of the country, they throw down different types of combinations of things. Here in your division, NCDOT, what you brine the roads, how far out in advance of events?
Well, it depends on the forecast pre-storm. I mean, if it's going to rain before the snowstorm, then we might wait because the rain would wash it off. But
Sure.
in this case, it seems like it's going to go straight to snow. So we brined pretty much all day yesterday. I think we're doing a last few touching up moments this morning. And then we're getting ready. We're getting our crews ready. We're going to be ready for the big storms coming in tomorrow.
Okay, and then do you additionally salt at points during the period, or are there certain areas that see it, or is it mostly handled with brine? How do you guys, or when would you deploy salt trucks?
Salt trucks come out when we start seeing the actual precipitation. Brine trucks help raise the temperature, the freezing temperature of the roadway itself, but the salt will actually melt any precipitation, any frozen precipitation that's on the road as it is. So it goes from brine pre-storm to salting and plowing once the storm hits.
You're giving us some great information here, Tim, but I'm also interested to know, you know, back in the Midwest, okay, I worked back in St. Louis for a while. We covered a major winter storm. It got so cold that the treatment lost its effectiveness just because the air was so cold. How effective is the brine to, like, when you pre-brine, is that good to mid-20s, or at what point is your threshold where it even becomes a little bit too cold for that to have much effect?
You're absolutely right, Craig. It's about in the mid-20s where the brine and the salt will not stick. In fact, we had a storm, I want to say it was 2018, where we didn't get a lot of precipitation, but we got enough that froze the roads, and then it stayed below 20 for several days. And at that point, we could push the precipitation off, but it would not melt, even with brine and salt at that point. So we need to worry about that, but hopefully the temperatures will get above that mid-20s point, and the salt treatments will work once the precipitation falls.
Yeah, absolutely. And with our proximity to the ocean, hopefully we'll stay a little bit warmer in this part of the region. But again, it's going to be a challenge. Now, one thing I'm also interested to know, the effectiveness, you know, with the plows, this should be a lighter, fluffier snow because it has been such a dry air mass and so cold. That may make for lighter, snowfall removal. Is that a situation that affects any of your operations at all, or I guess you just see what comes and deal with it, or how do you guys go about with that?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I mean, the lighter the snow, the easier it is to plow, but we're so close to the coast, and sometimes it's heavier than it is inland. So we just have to deal with what comes. But the good thing is that in North Carolina, if there are divisions out there toward the west that don't get hit as hard as we are, they will come and help us. Last year, I don't know if you remember, we had Division 13 come all the way out from the mountains to help us out, which turned out to be a really interesting story because a few months earlier, we sent our crews out to the mountains to help with Helene recovery. So we have this agreement with the rest of the state, and if some parts don't get hit as hard, they would be able to come and help us.
Yeah, you got to love that cooperation. And again, you know, we talk all the time, if we do get the snow, which there's pretty good confidence we're going to see something across the region, just how much will be determined. We also have the issue with blowing snow and drifting, which could lead to even some higher amounts in some locations, while others, you know, when it starts to blow and drift, it can kind of be a wild card as well.
Well, absolutely. And another thing that we haven't quite talked about yet is possible overwash.
Yeah.
With the winds coming in the way they are and the tides coming in the way they are, overwash on NC-12 is a very real possibility. And in fact, I'd say there's a pretty good chance that at some point over the weekend that NC-12 may have to close for a few hours.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. We're going to talk a lot more about those tide levels coming up as well a little later in the show. Want to thank you so much, Tim. And again, we'll remind folks, if you do see the NCDOT plow trucks out there, give them plenty of room to work. And I think with the blowing conditions and everything, not only do you have to worry about salt and everything else, but that blowing snow can reduce visibilities as well. So you guys will have your hands full. Thanks so much, Tim. We really appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thank you, Craig.
All right. Have a great weekend. And I know it's going to be a busy one for all of us. We're going to take another quick break, and we've got more Weather Desk right after this. Welcome back to the Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Craig Moeller, broadcasting to you from the 13 News Now studios here serving Hampton Roads in northeast North Carolina. We are bracing for the winter storm. I wanted to talk a little bit about travel delays and just show you how things are going to move along here. Early this morning, we really don't have any problems out there at all. But what we are going to find across the region is the changeable conditions as we head through the weekend. So we'll take a quick look at this. And again, you're going to find the conditions worsening as we go along. This will be later Friday and into Friday night. You can see some travel impacts back out to the west. For our area, we're still pretty good into early Saturday, but the potential for deteriorating conditions, especially from southeast Virginia here in Hampton Roads and eastern North Carolina, that's going to be wind and snow and higher than normal tides, a lot coming together. So, as you can imagine, once the storm arrives, you want to stay home and off the roads. But if you absolutely have to head out somewhere in this wintry weather, Ryan Adcock with AAA Tidewater has a few tips for traveling in the ice and snow. Ryan, thank you for joining us. You know, we got to quit meeting like this because it means the weather's getting bad on us again. What do you have for us, Ryan? Again, folks, first and foremost, stay off the roads. But if they have to venture out, what would you tell them?
Absolutely. Just a blanket, no pun intended, tip is to just drive with an extra amount of caution. Make sure that we are driving the appropriate speed limit for whatever may be falling, active precipitation may be falling, or whatever is already sticking on the road. And then as well, just making sure you're paying attention to everything around you as well so that you can get to where you're going safely and everyone else on the road can as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you want to allow that. It's bitterly cold. It's always a good idea to kind of have an emergency kit in the car anytime really through the winter, just in case you run into some problems. What types of things would you advise folks have, in a safety kit for their car if they're going to be traveling at all through this winter time?
Absolutely, especially during these bitterly cold temperatures, things like an extra heavy coat, a blanket, some non-perishable snacks, a phone charger, some extra water, anything like a reflective triangle or a flashlight that you can use if you are stranded there on the side of the road to use to make yourself more visible to others while you're there waiting for assistance.
We talk about, the need whenever you come up on water on any roadways, turn around, don't drown. You don't want to try to cross flooded roadways. With this weekend, we have the potential for some coastal flooding with the strong winds coming in. How much more dangerous is this if you think about this with these frigid temperatures and icy waters in some cases, or at least frigid waters near the coast? I mean, I guess you would stress even more reduced visibilities, high winds. This is just a potentially very dangerous situation.
Absolutely, which is why we're urging everybody to stay home if they can. But again, coming upon any standing water, you never know what has been blown into that standing water, whether it be anything big or heavy that could damage your vehicle, or two, just how deep that water is and what could potentially affect your vehicle and cause very costly damage to it. So just like you said, turn around, don't drown, and find another route.
Yeah, and we do have moderate to potential major tidal flooding with some locations across the region heading into Sunday morning. The other thing is when you've got wintry precipitation and then you get some of that kind of backing up some of the areas, it can create additional issues as well. So, Ryan, I want to thank you. I know you've been standing by to jump on with us. All good tips. Is there any last minute thing that you would want to encourage travelers or, again, you say stay off the roads, but any last moment message that you'd have to anybody thinking about it through the week?
Of course, after the precipitation has ended and you're cleaning off your cars to get out there and travel on the roads cautiously, making sure that we are cleaning off the tops of our vehicles of any snow as well, so that that is not blowing off as we're traveling down the roads. And then, just like you had mentioned earlier, if you're coming across any flashing red, blue, or amber flashing lights or any personal hazard lights on a vehicle there on the side of the road, making sure that we're slowing down and moving over so that we can give them enough room to get going again.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. All great tips. You think about making sure your lights are all, brushed off with the snow so that you're highly visible, but always remembering the snow on your roof can wind up in somebody else's visibility very easily. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, Ryan. I really appreciate you joining us here for that. All right, so that's what you need to know on the roads. How about this, though? What about the high seas? Believe it or not, Carnival Cruise Line is now adjusting the return schedule for one of its ships because of the storm. Carnival Sunshine will now arrive back in Norfolk one day earlier than planned. The ship is scheduled to return to the Half Moon Cruise and Celebration Center on Saturday instead of Sunday. Carnival officials say they're making the change out of an abundance of caution, allowing the ship to return ahead of potentially hazardous weather conditions. Carnival is notifying passengers directly. All right, we're going to take one more quick break, and coming up in 2 minutes, we're going to talk about how D.C. is struggling to dig out from the last winter storm, and we'll take an even closer look at our snow potential. We'll break down our forecast for our area right after the break. Welcome back to the weather desk. I thought I'd show you where we're seeing some snow right now here in the Commonwealth out towards Radford. You can see just off to the southwest of Lynchburg, back up towards Beckley, West Virginia. A little bit of light snow already showing up out that way. Of course, we're going to be turning our attention to this low pressure as it develops off the coast, and we're going to talk more about those impacts. I also wanted to mention up in D.C., they are still dealing with the snow. You know, they got hit especially hard last week with the last snowstorm, and the district is struggling to dig out. The mayor says layers of ice keep refreezing, slowing down the cleanup efforts, and they've even broken down some snow plows. Crews are calling those layers snowcrete, and they are now piling up the snow that they are removing at RFK Stadium. Rafael Sanchez Cruz has a closer look.
The RFK site is buzzing, but it's not because of the new stadium. Trucks are hauling piles of snow and ice from D.C. streets and dropping it off at RFK. Latasha from Southern Maryland says she's been working since 6 p.m. Wednesday. I asked her how many trips she had done so far today.
Probably about 15, 20.
Wow. Where's this one coming from?
M Street.
M Street.
Tony had just picked up a pile from 11th and Massachusetts Northwest.
How long are you going to be going for?
Probably about to 7.
7? How many hours? How many hours are you putting in today?
I'm gonna bring in 10 today.
10 today. And you gonna keep doing this throughout the week?
Yep, I'm gonna keep doing it every day until they go away.
The mountain of snow is longer than 2 football fields, and look how high. For perspective, I'm 6 feet tall.
I'm glad that it's off the street.
Eric and Diane Sims say they're happy to see progress, but their neighborhood is still struggling.
They could have done more to prepare in advance, and they could have also been faster on the ground to remove the stuff. Yeah. In my neighborhood, we have snow drifts and piles that we have people literally cannot park on the street and can't get in and out of our houses.
Some are enjoying the ice, but for others, like this mail carrier, it's making their job a lot harder.
Snowcrete, I guess it makes sense, and what a mess D.C. has dealing with that. We're going to have our own messy conditions over the weekend. Right now, though, we are dry. I want to talk temperatures. Low to mid-20s across most of Hampton roads. A little warmer at Currituck there, upper 20s. You factor in the winds, it's still feeling like the single digits. Melfa and Wallops, we had a cold air advisory that will expire in 9 minutes. We're just about done with it, but you're still looking at wind chills between 10 and 15 degrees for several locations in the immediate metro. Now, later this afternoon, we're going to be closer to 20. Still a very chilly afternoon. And as we look forward over the next 10 days, we get a little warmer into next week. We'll be up into the low 40s. That's going to feel great. Keep in mind, our average high is 51. And beyond that, as we look ahead, we are still expecting below average temperatures as we go all the way into the middle part of February. So very, very cold. All right, we do have our weather impact alert for the coastal storms Saturday and Sunday, accumulating snow. The potential for tidal flooding and gusts at the coast, 50 to 60 miles per hour. Wanted to bring in my colleague, Hunter Forst. Let's talk a little bit about this. Hunter, you see the two models here, the Euro in red and the GFS in yellow. We're starting to see these marry up pretty closely with that center there, located a little bit, maybe just a skosh farther to the east. We've been watching this. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's good we're starting to see them marry up a little bit. It gives you a little
more
bit more confidence in the forecast with this. But the further it goes out towards the east, the least snow or the less snow you're going to see for portions of the East Coast. So it makes a big difference on where that low pressure actually sets up.
So we are going to see still snow over eastern North Carolina and into southeast Virginia. That hasn't changed. But this is what we've been saying all week long. You know, if this thing shifts another 25 miles farther east, it takes the back edge of that and moves it farther. Right. So again, when we throw out some of the numbers you're going to see, this is based on what the models are suggesting right now. It is our best educated guess at what's going to happen, understanding that there could still be some fluctuation. addition, as you mentioned, it's good to see the models kind of marrying up, and then you can see that's a tight pressure gradient.
I was gonna say,
the winds are still
storm.
whipping. Yeah, we've still got a lot of issues. So let's talk some more about this. Here's a look at the GFS. It's interesting that it tried to depict a little bit of mix here. This air is so just bone chilling. I mean, it's very frigid air. So this is going to be a light powdery snow across most of the region starting Saturday and really building through the afternoon and into the evening. You're going to be working with Tim and Evan, two other members of our team, Saturday evening. This is when it should get the nastiest, Saturday night into early Sunday.
Yeah, and that's also when we're really going to see the winds starting to pick up as well. Gusts 30, 40, up to 50 plus. Miles an hour, especially closer to the coast. So,
and down along the southern outer banks, even stronger winds potentially.
Right.
We talked with NCDOT, and Tim Haas was telling us, they're really pretty much just banking on overwash down there.
Yeah.
So you think about it, if you have, surfaces that are basically frozen, you get overwash, the icing that could take place down there could be a huge issue for crews, dealing with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we see the overwash when we get hurricanes going by too. So you get these big coastal strong storms, and you could see the same thing.
And if you're newer to the area and you're not familiar, you get a good nor'easter or a winter coastal low, and sometimes they can have similar effects to, say, a tropical storm or even a weaker hurricane. This one's not going to be, it doesn't look like quite that bad for this one, but still those winds 50 to 60 miles an hour, that is tropical storm force gusts. Yep. So that's a GFS. It pulls the snow out around midday on Sunday with improvements coming after that. Let's look at the Euro. And you can see again as we get into Saturday around midday, you start to see snow kind of filling in. And then again, your prime time, Saturday evening and late afternoon through the overnight Saturday, the Euro cranks up that snow. I will say by Sunday, look at that. It's already starting to pull it out by Sunday morning, and maybe we draw it a little bit earlier.
But here's the thing. It's going out early Sunday morning, right? But it's also going to be absolutely frigid. Yeah. So people are going to want to be going outdoors, shoveling, doing some sledding, but you are going to want to bundle up from head to toe.
Yeah.
Wind chills are going to be below zero.
It's going to be crazy. We're going to talk about the extreme cold watch in just a moment. I wanted to talk about the forecast confidence. You mentioned with the models kind of marrying up, we're growing increasingly confident. It is cold enough for snow for most of the area. There might be a little bit of mixing down around the outer banks, but we have high confidence that it is cold enough for snow. The storm timing starting Saturday, moving out Sunday, highly confident. That's been all week.
Yeah.
This is the one that's a little more challenging. I would say medium confidence at best on the snow totals.
Yeah.
So as we get into this, take a look at these various models, and it looks like the NAM has kind of come back to its senses a little bit. This one was going even crazier before. But the NAM is producing large amounts of snow across the region. The GFS and the Euro, the two that we just showed you, are now going more like 4 to 6 inches for Norfolk. And you can see, again, lighter amounts to the north, generally speaking, and then heavier amounts down to the south. The one thing with this, those rain to snow ratios, the liquid to frozen ratios, I think these are pretty much based on a 10 to 1. Yeah. We may see more like a 15 to 1, which would take these totals and bump them up. Right now, probably around 7 inches or so, a good ballpark for Norfolk, give or take.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good that if we did get 7 inches of snow, say, you'd rather have the 15 to 1 ratio than 10 because, it'll be a lot easier to do the shoveling.
Fluffier, lighter snow to move off. Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm just throwing this out just so you see what we are grappling with here. This is the graph model. And look at this. It only goes 1 1/3 inches. That's why I say while most of the models are going, 4 to 6, 4 to 7 or 8 inches across the region, we do have some that are saying, it's going to be lighter, heavier stuff down there. We're not going to get much. There will be a cut line somewhere. And if that line comes south, we may have the numbers, drop significantly. So important to stay updated on the forecast. Again, you see our general numbers here, what we've been talking about, and it's important to note there is the potential for blizzard conditions as we go through the overnight Saturday into early Sunday. The blowing snow with gusts up to 50 or 60 miles an hour, potentially in some areas. That's going to create issues. Hunter, we're going to be busy. We've got special extended coverage for you coming up throughout the weekend on 13 News Now. Plus, our entire team will be working. I'm going to be in with Taylor Stephenson both Saturday and Sunday morning. You're going to be working afternoons with Evan and Tim on Saturday. Yep. And we'll see this thing through and make sure that you stay up on all of it. Make sure you've got your phones charged up and make sure you've got access to our 13 News Now mobile app. It's always a great resource to have. If you haven't already gotten it, you can get it from the App Store and on Google Play. Make sure you're ready to go. We'll keep you updated on your forecast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time from the Weather Desk.